Hey guys, how's it going? This is Josh back again with another movie review, and today we're going to talk about the newest dceu film, The Flash. The Flash is one of my favorite superheroes. I always enjoyed the character. I love Barry, I love Wally West, especially when the character would show up in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, or when he would show up in the Superman animated adventure series. I always just really enjoyed that character. When it comes to the TV show on CW, I really enjoyed the first season, and I think Grant Gustin is actually a really good Barry Allen. I don't like the show after the first season. Now, I mentioned that Grant Gustin, I feel like, is the live-action Flash. However, I must say, in this movie, Ezra Miller really defines himself as his own Flash. There are parts in this movie that are filled with drama and emotion, and I feel like he does a really good job at playing this more emotional Barry character. But then also, in the midst of playing his younger self, we finally get to see the humorous and charismatic side of the character that I feel like has been missing, honestly, even before the CW show. But here, he's actually really funny. Even as the older Barry as well, he gets quite a few jokes that work and are super entertaining. I also must say that the actress that portrays Nora Allen, Barry's mother, Maribel Verdú, does a really good job for the limited time that she's on screen. Every moment that she shares with Barry, whether it be the younger actor or the older actor, is really endearing and heartwarming. This wasn't something that I was really expecting because, like I said, it's a DCEU movie, and when it comes to emotion, I feel like even in their better movies, the emotional aspects usually run paper thin, so I don't really care about them. But in this movie, the conflict of Barry wanting to save his mother and potentially losing her forever or having her forever is incredibly heartfelt, and it got me. I also feel like Michael Keaton as Batman is a great auxiliary character. He feels like the perfect breath of fresh air to the story, and when he's added, it gives the rest of the movie life. It's really not until like 2/3 through the movie that you start to feel the age, and Michael Keaton isn't in this movie a ton. He's not taking over, Ezra Miller as the star of the movie. It's not a Batman movie by any means. However, Michael Keaton's performance does resuscitate the movie and allows the movie to carry on up until the third act, which we'll get into when I am talking about my criticisms. Another Batman that's good is also Ben Affleck. I also thought that he did a pretty good job for the limited time that he's in here. I always felt like he was a really good Batman. He just never got the opportunity to portray Batman in a well-written film, and unfortunately, since this isn't his movie, I always just imagine a multiverse somewhere out there where we got a Ben Affleck movie that was written and directed by him in a standalone universe, and it was a cinematic masterpiece. But instead, he is relegated to what I would assume is his final appearance in The Flash as pretty much a cameo, and it's serviceable and enjoyable for when he's there. It's just unfortunate he's not in this movie a little bit more. I must say the biggest aspect of this film, outside of the actors' performances, I'll give this film credit for, has to be the overall tone of this movie. Now, this isn't MCU-esque, especially like Phase 4 MCU of just giving you nothing but humor and no real drama or actual weight to the story whatsoever. No, there are stakes. There is humor in this film, and it works, and it adds a breath of fresh air and levity to the otherwise super heavy and dark DCEU. Now, I'm not saying everything has to be improv hour like how The Suicide Squad was, which I feel like is the only movie that could really work under those circumstances, considering it's directed and written by James Gunn. This movie isn't the same as that. However, the humor works and the tone blends together pretty well. There's never a moment where I feel like the tones are jarring or clashing against one another. There's usually moments of levity, and then there's moments of drama in a repetitive pattern, not something where it's just like, hey, this is something super dramatic and let's undercut it with a joke, which I also appreciate. Outside of that, that's pretty much it for my praise of this film. Those are things that I do really enjoy, but let's just get into my criticisms and then I'll give you all my final thoughts. The biggest criticism I'll have for this film overall is that I feel like this multiverse thing is super cheap. We're trying to cash in on what other films have done better, and in some cases have done worse. You know, we really have to thank Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Mid for the conundrum we're in now, because it took all of the wrong lessons from Spider-Man No Way Home, which I feel like, even though I still have my criticisms for it, handled the multiverse aspect of introducing legacy characters and actors much better. It was treated with respect and emotional integrity, whereas we go to Multiverse of Mid and then Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and there's just this laziness behind the delivery of what is actually going on here. We're dealing with multiversal collapse, and it never really feels like any of the characters are taking the situation serious. This kind of falls in the middle of the characters not really taking the situation too serious, and the characters actually realizing the weight of the situation and dealing with the consequences. That is a spectrum that has been established by this multiverse thing, and some aspects in the MCU fall on one side and other shows and aspects fall on the other, which is why I really don't like it. It's way too inconsistent, and the writing is just awful. It doesn't feel like any of the writers for each of these properties are watching each other's content, which doesn't really make sense considering how closely connected this universe is supposed to be, which is obviously the same case for the DCEU and has been the issue since the beginning. But now I feel like with this movie, unfortunately, combining the issues I have with the plot as well as just the underdevelopment of all of the other supporting characters in this film, it just feels incredibly Neanderthalic at times. I don't know if that's a word, but like, just follow me. The women characters in this film are the worst. And when I say that, I mean, we're in an age now where I feel like there is a overcomplication on writing women characters because people want to make strong women characters without realizing that real strong women characters have depth, they fail, they have consequences, repercussions, trials and tribulations. You can compare Luke Skywalker to Peter Parker. All of these people have been portrayed in a way where they are the underdog and they overcome the odds, thus making you at least relate to them in some way, because we all have our own issues and trials and tribulations that we go through on a day-to-day basis. So to see a character go through the same thing makes them much more relatable and enjoyable. Strong female characters, unfortunately, don't really go through that. You could watch this video by Critical Drinker on that. I don't usually agree with the majority of his takes, but I feel like when it comes to this topic, he actually summarized the issue in Hollywood pretty well. In this case, it's almost like that turned up to the 10th power, to the point where we've reached the other side of the spectrum. Now, none of the women characters in this film are portrayed as like exclusively sex objects with nothing to provide. However, they are just introduced as things. The Iris West character isn't a love interest. She's just someone who interacts with Barry for the sake of exposition. Outside of that, she brings nothing to the plot. She's not even someone that Barry saves in this movie. She is just there to establish that there is an Iris West for this Barry character. Then we get into the Supergirl character, someone who's promoted as, I guess, the second lead in this film, has no character development and no real conflict. She is just a force of nature. And to be honest with you, the same that could be described for these women characters can be described for what could be assumed as the antagonist of this movie, General Zod. He is more of a force of nature than a character. He doesn't say much, he doesn't do much, and Michael Shannon doesn't perform much. In fact, it felt like they just took a 5-minute FaceTime conversation and got moments of him saying random things and dubbed his voiceover. These aren't characters. Iris West isn't a character, Supergirl isn't a character, General Zod isn't a character. None of the supporting Kryptonians are characters either. They're just obstacles in the way of Barry messing with time. This is where I'll get into spoiler territory for potentially my biggest issue with the film. The thing that I usually like about time travel movies is that it's usually a monkey's paw type deal, and even when the main character fixes things, there still has to be repercussions for initially messing with time. This movie would make you believe that that is the case, but that's simply not true. By the end of the movie, Barry is supposedly learning that the lesson is, hey, maybe there are just things that you have to accept, which is something that they hint throughout the entire film. Like, you just have to let things go, let things be the way that they are, because without these tragedies, without these tragic events, without these good moments, you wouldn't be the person you are today. And that isn't just scientifically or chronologically, that is emotionally, mentally, all of those things matter. However, Barry doesn't learn that, and he still changes time anyway. And the consequence that he deals with isn't something that's accidental or just a sheer consequence of time traveling initially, which I feel like it should be, because once you mess with time, there has to be permanent repercussions. But instead, there's an implication here that even if there is permanent repercussions, the biggest repercussion by the end of this movie isn't a product of Barry initially messing with time. He still messes with time anyway in the same moment that he realizes he's not supposed to mess with time. Now, I saw the behind the scenes of why they chose the ending that they chose, which, don't get me wrong, I wasn't upset at the ending. I actually laughed out loud, and I actually saw that people in the theater were upset about it, and I didn't care. I actually liked the actor that was involved, and I thought it was pretty funny. It's literally him trading away someone's entire life for his dad's freedom, which I would understand if Barry wasn't presented as a good guy, but he's supposed to be a superhero who is okay with his dad being free as long as it means that this Batman, who he knows, loves, and respects and admires, doesn't exist and his life is wiped from existence. I think that's kind of offensive, I'm not gonna lie to you, and it's also really fucking stupid. I think you could have had the same ending without Barry changing time and him just dealing with the consequences and realizing, fuck, I should have never done this to begin with. But instead, he's presented with something that he could still fix, but we're never going to get a follow-up or conclusion to this, and he treats it as if he's not going to do anything about it. Now, I am assuming that is the follow-up to that storyline, but when it's treated in the post-credit scene, it seems as if that is what's happening, or at least by the end of that day, that is what's happening. I feel like that is just incredibly lazy, or in fact, I feel like kind of overcomplicates the ending, in which you could have just had him do the right thing and still suffer consequences, but instead he's presented with something that he could still potentially fix, and it seems like he just chooses not to. That really rubbed me the wrong way. I feel like the ending could have been handled a little bit better, but hey, what can you do? This is what we got. I don't hate this movie. I don't think this is the worst movie ever. I don't even think this is the worst superhero movie we've seen this year. I don't think this is the worst superhero movie in the past 5 years, and I don't think this is the worst DCEU movie. Regardless of how much money this movie makes, I think this movie is better than 90% of the DCEU. The only thing it's not better than is the Peacemaker show and the Suicide Squad. However, the special effects, combine that with the contrivances and the plot holes, it is just something that I was almost really upset at. But the performances of Ezra Miller as the two Barrys, as well as Maribel Verdú as his mother, and Michael Keaton returning as Batman, there was still tons of fun to be had and tons to enjoy. There's an entertaining movie here. However, this isn't the greatest superhero movie of all time, as many were claiming, and it's really not the worst superhero movie of all time, as plenty of other people were claiming. Like, honestly, I feel like with this movie, I would enjoy it the second time I watch it more than I did the first time, just mainly because I know what I'm walking into and I'm not taking it as serious. But other than that, shout out to Andy Muschietti and shout out to Ezra Miller. Y'all did y'all thing. Shout out Michael Keaton. Hopefully we get Michael Keaton back for a Batman Beyond movie, but that's just wishful thinking. But alright, thank y'all so much for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me know down in the comments what y'all thought about this movie, if you liked it, hated it, loved it. If you disagree with what I said, or if you agree, let me know. All my socials will be in the comments and in the description, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye bye.